Welcome to the X Podcast, episode 7, which is crazy. Episode 7. Hope you've had an amazing Thanksgiving. So to everybody watching, I don't know what you did this Thanksgiving. Maybe you can drop it in the chat. If you didn't get to check out our last podcast, go back and check it out, share it, and whatever platform you are viewing from. We are so excited you're with us. Just a reminder, we do this live at noon every Wednesday, and then on Fridays it drops to YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, everywhere where podcasts are delivered. Is that even a thing? I don't know. But we're so glad that you are along for the ride with us as we try to figure out this crazy thing called life and get better at it along the way. And today have 2 more special guests, and I am so excited because today we're going to dive into a really, really exciting, necessary, painful, tricky,
exhausting
subject called parenting.
Yes.
And so if you guys are ready, I'm just going to teach you what I know and take some notes. And
I'm so ready.
I can't wait.
I am just kidding, but I'm so excited because I got 2 more of my favorite people with me. We got Jesse James McCoy.
That is my full name.
I have called you that so long, that's not even your name, is it?
It's not.
All right. What's your middle name? Can we say
Mitchell.
Jesse
Aw,
Mitchell
I like that.
McCoy.
That
I
is.
love
That's a nice
that.
James works too.
James works too.
Jesse James is a cool guy.
He is a really
Both
cool
of them.
guy. Wait,
Wasn't there more than one?
I thought there was
I
yes, there's a girl singer, right? There's a girl singer,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
then there is a Western gunslinger.
That's right.
That's right.
And then
That's
the
Jesse James.
the West Coast custom chopper guy.
Yes, that's the
That-
one.
that makes
That's the
motorcycles.
only one I
Don't know
knew.
about him.
So
even
there's
though
3.
I am a pretty famous motorcycle guy. But we have Jesse and several things about Jesse that are really amazing. Number one of the first people I got to know when I moved to Columbus, Ohio. And for both of the guests today, one of the reasons that we have them on is not only because they are parents, and not only because they're awesome parents, but because their role in their career has to do with families and children. So they bring a lot of experience, a lot of expertise. Jesse, I'm going to let you talk about yourself in just a moment, but Jesse has been in youth ministry for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, 4 years full-time.
And again, even though this isn't necessarily a church podcast, we are coming from the context of we are followers of Jesus. We work at a church. And so, full disclosure. And Jesse is our next-gen pastor. That's fancy language for he oversees everything next generations, the operations and ministries of birth to kids, middle school, high school, eventually college. I don't know. We're just speaking into the future.
Yeah.
And he has got a 2-year-old named Milo, who is one of the cutest little boys in the world. My favorite birthday video was him and Sarah sent a video of Milo saying, "Happy birthday, Pastor Russ." And I melted and teared up a little bit, but I won't admit that. Okay. Then we have Becca
Hi,
Dawson.
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing well. We asked Becca if she wanted a coffee today, and she said that she stops drinking coffee at 8 a.m.
Yes.
Which is when most people wake up.
Right.
Yeah.
So what does that even mean? So speaking of go-getter,
Okay.
Becca Dawson has, she wanted us to bring this up. She has her master's degree.
Okay.
Yep.
And she oversees kids ministry at our church, and she has 2 children. Mm-hmm. She has Ren,
Yeah.
another heart stealer.
Yes.
She, not to brag, has drawn pictures for me before.
Yes.
And I still have them. And she's 8 years old.
She just turned 8 yesterday.
Just turned 8
She's
yesterday.
8 going on 18.
Will she be watching
Yes.
this?
She might be watching this.
We
yeah.
should we sing happy birthday to her?
No.
No, okay. And then we have Cage, who is 11 years old.
Yes.
And in your role here,
Yeah.
you oversee kids ministry, but you also have another job where you literally teach teachers, field of
Yes.
services at
Yeah.
Capital University.
Yeah, field supervisor, yeah.
Field
so
supervisor.
I oversee student teachers in their last semester. They're ready to head out into the field. They're student teaching, and they'll be up-and-coming teachers in the very near future, so I oversee them. So
Wow.
Yeah, so
No
I
big
always
deal.
say that I have worked with kids since I wasn't a kid. That's how long I've worked with kids. So they're
Wow.
definitely my passion.
I love it. I love it. And I just have to say this, you know, I'm not a parent, but over my life, I've tried to take notes from people that, in my mind, did youth ministry a whole lot of years, and being around families and observing people that I'm like, I want to be a parent like them, and I see the fruit of their kids. And you two, I told you this before the podcast, are people that, in my mind, not that this is the goal, but you make parenting look effortless, and you're both incredible parents.
Thank you.
And you're people that I know I'm excited to learn from today. And I know we've had, by the way, this is also probably a moment of reckoning, because rumor has it, we have had some ladies and some parents say, we need to have some female power on this podcast. So welcome,
Thank
Becca,
you.
to that. It is long overdue.
So am I the first?
You're the first.
Oh,
You're the
okay.
first and the last. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. No, you. So we're so excited to have you on here. And man, what a topic. And what, especially in 2020,
Yeah.
where all the pain and the complications and complexities of parenting are highlighted. But I've probably spoiled some of your self-introduction. But Jesse, what do people need to know about you, your role, who you are? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So yeah, you said it. I mean, a big part of what I do is next gen pastor. It's a big part of my identity. But what I always tell people of like all the things that I get to be is, I get to be a pastor, I get to be a husband, I get to be, an epic Call of Duty player, like all this stuff. My favorite thing that I get to be is a dad. And so I'm pumped to talk about today's topic. But yeah, a little bit about me. Born and raised in Lancaster, Ohio.
Come on.
My one claim to fame is I lived in LA for a teeny tiny little bit. It's no big deal. I'll tell you about it later.
And you were in a band.
I was in a band. You can dig deep into my Facebook profile and find some of those pictures if you need a good laugh.
YouTube.
There might be some YouTube. That's also not. I'm a YouTube star. It's no big deal.
What you are?
I
Yeah,
think-
you run the vlogs for
Yeah.
our youth.
And
Yeah.
I do a mean YouTube intro, so I'll teach you that later.
Yes.
Yeah.
Becca, actually, over quarantine, we made YouTube videos for our kids, and Becca made some of the best.
I saw
yeah,
that.
they were
That was
fun.
so good.
They were fun. I
That
miss
was
those.
so good.
So yeah, I mean, lived in Lancaster my whole life. Love sports. Love video games.
What sport?
You don't love sports.
I do love sports.
Wait, I thought that was a joke too.
It was.
Okay. All right. What was your band name? Sorry.
I do like basketball though.
You do? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
To watch or
Same.
to play? This is news to
Both.
me. Okay.
I don't love it. No, that was a joke.
What's your game? Or what's your team?
My team right now is the Lakers.
The Lakers?
Come on.
Okay.
Wherever LeBron goes, I'm following.
I got you.
I'm
Okay.
that guy.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Amazing.
that's about it.
Becca.
Yeah. I don't really have any claims to fame. You just introduced my kids, Cage and Ren. And, of course, wife to Ian is an amazing role that I have also. And born and raised... Actually, I was not born in Ohio. I was born in Michigan, but I was told I think I was in Michigan for maybe 3 days. And then we moved back
Okay.
to Ohio. So I've been in Ohio
Okay.
my whole life. Of course, I have to bring up that I do CrossFit.
Yes, you do CrossFit.
You wanted me to bring that up.
Yes. Yeah,
Not to brag.
I dragged it out of you. All right,
Okay,
you do CrossFit.
I guess.
And something tells me that you are amazing CrossFitter.
No.
Have you won awards?
No, gosh.
Are you as good as me?
No.
I think you guys should have a CrossFit contest.
Should we do it?
Like
Is it
first
arm
one to
wrestling?
clean this table. and
Yeah.
press
I
it.
will not arm wrestle you. You will beat me. But so yeah, tell us, how'd you get into CrossFit?
Truthfully, it was something I had wanted to do for a long time. I've always enjoyed working out, running, and stuff. And I wanted to try it, but it is a little intimidating to try out at first. But actually, a friend of mine bought me a gift card for a month free CrossFit, and then the rest is history. I was hooked. So I used the gift card and just stayed with it. Yeah.
I love that. And you were ragging on me for me not doing it lately. So
Right. Well, when you set your alarm for 5:20, and then you were very, very proudly said you got up at 6:06.
I did. But I
Come
didn't do
on.
CrossFit. Okay, so let's dive into this. In my mind, the unsung heroes of 2020 are nurses and parents, and
Teachers.
and teachers and teachers. I'm so sorry, but
Shout out to teachers.
Yes.
I love teachers.
yes, and now parents are teachers.
Yeah. True.
So let's just start off with I think one of the things that stands out in my mind about you two is, in anything in life, you can kind of wing it. And in a way, I assume parenting, especially with your first kid, is kind of like an experiment. Like, you can't, like, I've read books, 'cause one day I would love to be a parent. I'd love to be a good parent, but I kind of have a feeling that a lot of the book gets thrown out once life hits. And so one of the things I've noticed about you two, though, is I feel like you are two of the most intentional people I know. And I feel like you bring that intentionality into parenting, and that you actually parent with a purpose, and you parent with intention. And so, I don't know, I just want to throw it out to you. What does that look like when you think of parenting, when you think of healthy parenting, when you think of intentional parenting, and maybe even from your roles in kids and in ministry, you get a front row seat, not in a judgmental way, but you get to, because you're invested in the lives of kids and teenagers. And so you can't do that without observing patterns, without observing some healthy things, some unhealthy things. And so, I just want to throw that out there. What stands out in your mind immediately when you think of that?
Yeah, I think I love what you just said about like how you can read books before you become a parent. Like, I only read one book because I'm not a big reader. But a friend of mine named Mike that lives in Connecticut sent me a book called Welcome to the Club, Daddy, right before Milo was born. And it was really short. And basically it said that it was a book saying that basically books are not going to help you when it's 2 o'clock in the morning.
Dang it.
True.
And baby's not sleeping. It's hungry. You can't figure out why it's crying. And you're a first-time parent. You have absolutely no idea what to do, and you're losing your mind. Books are out the window at that point. So it is a lot of thinking on your feet, figuring it out. And especially if, you're married or co-parenting, like working together as a team or having some sort of support unit. But you can have a plan. Like parenting is of all the things we'll probably talk about, like it's on a spectrum of parents that are going to be really, really loosey-goosey, go with the flow, and parents that are going to be really, really, strict. We have their day planned down to the minute. And I think everybody's got to find in every element of parenting, like where is your spot as a parent that works for you, your family dynamic, and for your kid. Because, I have one kid right now, but another one on the way.
Yeah. And, can we say the name?
Yeah, his name's going to be Cooper.
Come on. Welcome, Cooper.
Yeah, we'll have Milo Kent and Cooper Dean.
When's he due?
The end of March.
Congrats.
And then we are done. 2 was the compromise. I wanted 1, but I was overruled. So, like, all kids are a little different. All parents are a little bit different. So understanding, first of all, that what works for one parent may not work for you. And what works for you may not work for another parent.
Yeah.
Everything's on a spectrum, and it is very much trial and error with everything. What
was one thing that surprised you the most as a new parent? What was one thing that maybe you're like, I expected this to be this way, but oh man, this did not?
I think each phase has kind of surprised me. So the newborn phase was so much harder.
Really?
Than I thought it would. It would be. It was. I literally. This is going to sound stupid to every parent out there, but I didn't know I wasn't going to sleep a lot. Like I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Literally, when they say they have to get up and eat every 2 hours, that means nighttime too. That means midnight, 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and if it's you're waking up then. It's not just, let me roll over, hit the snooze button. It's, no, I have to wake up, make sure I'm feeding the baby the right way. That was way harder than I thought. And then you have to maintain a normal life during the day. It's not like you sleep all day. It's the baby has to continue to do that. And then, especially if you're a working parent, you got to go to work too, and not let that slip.
Yeah.
So that was really hard. The toddler phase, which we're in still, but like when they start walking, that was way more fun than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
Like when they start walking and they start I don't know, you can really tell that they're recognizing you and they get excited when you come home. And
that's cool. That's awesome.
That was so much more of a big deal. Like when Milo would start reaching for me, like when I come home, oh my goodness, there's nothing like that. You can't experience anything like that in the world outside of parenting.
That makes me melt when kids that aren't my kids do that. So I'm gonna be in trouble one day. Becca.
Yes, especially if you have a little girl. The girls with the pink and the buzz.
I can't. Okay. I want to hear from you.
Yeah.
What you think of
intentional?
When you think of intentional parenting and just, I don't know, things you've observed that you've noticed that man, I think this would be helpful. But first, kind of related to the question I asked him, What makes you laugh when people that are not parents?
Oh yeah.
What's the funniest thing you hear that you don't say it, but inside you think it, when a non-parent says, when I'm a parent, I'm going to?
It's the food thing for me.
Okay.
And I say that laughing because that was me too. Oh, I'm sure I said everything. Definitely when I hear parents say that it's no sugar or no fast food, no McDonald's, I just smile and nod like, okay.
You secretly make fun of them.
Yes.
Okay.
In my head, I'm like, okay. But I know I was that mom too. So,
Yeah.
and actually, I was probably up to having kids. So my husband and I got married, and we had a 5-year plan because I was very intentional and I'm very organized and planned out. And so we had this 5-year plan. We're going to get married and we won't have kids for 5 years. And everybody said to us, "You will never follow that." Well, it was actually 6. We didn't have kids for 6 years after we got married. So we followed that.
And knowing you, I believe that.
Yes. In fact, so I was a full-time teacher at the time, and I said, well, what I'll do is I'll get pregnant and I'll have my child over spring break so that I can be paid from spring break all through the summer. And that actually happened. He was born on Good Friday that year. So very planned out. And then of the pregnancy, just one of those crazy women. I just cringe thinking of myself 11 years ago. I just want to apologize now to anybody who knew me 11 years ago pregnant, and it was so planned out, and I was just annoying. And then the baby came, and I was like, oh, well, this is throwing me for a loop. And so I tried to be intentional, and the first year was very difficult. I found it very lonely. I don't know if any moms can relate with me there. Something else that I also found surprising becoming a new mom was the mommy wars. And I don't know if anybody's listening who understands that, but the mommy wars is a real thing. And that really threw me for a loop and took me a couple years to kind of find my footing there. But when I think of intentional parenting, I don't think of small details. To me, small details can be flexible.
What do you mean?
Okay, to say, well, we'll probably have them going to bed at 8 p.m. We'll have them, those are very small details that yes, that's a great goal. But when I think of intentional, I think of a little more broad. So more so as parents, we would be saying it's really important to us that our kids get enough sleep. Now, what time they go to bed, maybe they can sleep in.
That might vary from family to family.
That could, yeah. But if the bigger goal is we just really know that kids who don't get enough sleep can't function, that would be the more intention. Don't get caught up on the specifics. And so for my husband and I, we were intentional. We had like big goals, just broad, not big, I'm sorry, broad. And through the years, we've weeded out what didn't meet that broad goal or goals, and that was our intention. Just the broad goals, keep with that, raise them from a biblical worldview, take them to church. Those are broad goals. But everything else, you know.
So you had kind of like your core values, but how that plays out, you're going to be flexible.
Yes.
Yeah, it seems like flexibility would be a really important concept in parenting. Let me ask you a question. What do you feel like, I know that one of the things that's really important to you too is when you look at the emotional health of not just your kids, but the kids that you pastor, that you lead. And I'm just curious, like if I'm a parent, like one of the things I want to learn is how do I pass on and help develop emotional health in my kids one day, if I have kids? Like, what does that look like? Or if you're around kids, maybe you don't have kids, but I think anybody watching this podcast, there's things for us to learn because there's people that may just look up to you as a father figure or a mother figure. You may be an older brother in someone's life, and I think some of these principles, some of these concepts can still, and maybe to make it specific, let me ask this: what is the power and relationship of words in parenting? Because I believe, one of the verses that's near and dear to me, it says, is that the power of life and death is in the tongue.
Yes.
And so I think in any relationship, but it seems to me, even as a non-parent, that this concept is probably even more powerful with kids, that how do our words shape their interior world and how they view life and where they go in the future. And
I think the first thing I want to say, just with like the emotional health piece that you brought up. We say this phrase a lot when it comes to leadership, but I think the more I get into parenting, the more I see it. It's almost more true in parenting is that more is caught than taught. We can talk to our kids about emotional health, talk to our teenagers about handling like the pressures of social media and all that stuff. But if we as parents aren't handling it well, everything we say is going to go one in ear and out the other, and they're going to develop the same patterns and habits that we have as parents. Because they're going to catch more off of just watching us than actually what we teach them.
Yeah, that's good.
But yeah, the power of words is super important, especially as a parent. I think sometimes as parents, maybe we forget that our words are the heaviest words in the ears of a kid.
Yeah.
I think we all can remember things that our parents said to us decades ago, because the words of a parent matter so much.
What are some words that you think frequently should be spoken to and over a child? And maybe what are some words that you believe should never be spoken?
Yeah, I think it's really simple. Is never tell a kid what they're not. Never. Oh, you're just not a hard worker. Oh, you're just not diligent enough. Never tell them what they're not. Tell them what they are.
That's good.
Oh man, you are creative. You are just, when you walk into a room, you just light it up. There's this joy about you. Tell them what they are.
So good.
Because I think what we do if we tell kids, and we've all experienced this as adults, the things that people have told us we weren't when we were developing through the childhood and teenage years, those become the insecurities we deal with as adults.
Wow.
It's like, oh, well, I'm just not this enough. I'm not blah, blah, blah.
That
Those things
so
roll around
good.
forever. But instead, if we can speak life and tell kids what they are and teach them to, yeah, you're going to have some weaknesses, whatever, that's okay, but double down on your strengths. Double down on what you have.
That's good.
What you have is much more than what you don't have,
That's good.
So,
well, one of my favorite leaders, Judah Smith, he's a great speaker, but more than anything, I love what I've seen of his spirit and just his joy in his life and who he is. And he's one of those people that I really look up to. And I heard him talking one time in an interview. He said from as early as he can remember, his dad would tell him every single day, people like you and they want to hear what you have to say. He would just tell him, he said, before you ever go into a room, people like you and they want to hear what you have. And he said there's a little bit of a shock when he grew up and someone didn't like him. He's like, what do you mean? He goes, people like me and they want to hear. But it created this capstone of like emotional health that for the rest of his life he was able to step into. I love that so much. What about you?
I love what Pastor Jesse said. It reminds me of kind of the phrase labels. So we put a lot of, I have heard parents say this, and it can be so damaging where they say, oh, that's my lazy kid. And it's this label, and it seems to stick with them, and they are hard to work off. I mean, it can be not just only parents, but family members. Even the story that I'm thinking of now, which I have no idea why I'm bringing up this story. Okay, but let's do it. I had this birthmark on my neck. Okay. And I'm an identical twin. And so
You are?
I am, yes. I had this birthmark on my neck. And so this was a way that people would tell, my sister's name is Gina and I apart. Becca has the birthmark. And in my head, when they would say Becca had the birthmark, I pictured this enormous mole. I mean, it to me in my head that they labeled me with that. I actually got it removed. When I got old enough, I got it removed because I could not stand it.
Wow.
And that's sort of the same idea with labels. You think as a parent, you're flippantly saying, that's my lazy one. And I have to catch myself sometimes too. I like to, and actually Pastor Jesse has got on me about this. I like to poke fun at Ren, she's so talkative and clumsy and just larger than life. But
Cover your ears, man.
I have to make sure that I counter that with all that, at least with saying, but I love that about you, or this is how this can be used when you grow up. Are you kidding? God has called us to have a joyful expression. That's amazing that you're wired that way.
I love that.
And so, if you could just see a picture of what in my head I had built up as a kid, and I know that family members were innocent about it. I know they didn't mean to differentiate me and my sister with this stupid birthmark that in my
Right.
head was enormous and
Right.
ugly and hideous.
Right.
But it was so damaging to me. And so think of it that way when you're talking to a child, especially when you're talking in front of them, or if they're in earshot. Those labels stick.
Yeah, that's good.
And they have to do a lot of work as an adult to work
Yeah.
those labels off.
No, it's so good. And I think you would speak to this on the flip side. You were not advocating, you guys aren't advocating, I'm taking myself out of it. You're not advocating that someone just speaks false hope of if they're 3 foot tall, they're going to be Michael Jordan.
Right.
And you're not shying away from when there's correction and discipline, but you are, psychology shows the power of every positive comment versus every negative comment. And what you're doing is, we believe we build our worlds with our words. And you're building their world day by day with the words that you speak. By speaking to who they're becoming, you're actually helping shape who they're becoming. And I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, because I know a lot of these episodes deal with personal growth and emotional health, but I think it may be worth just a moment to peek under the hood, because you said something earlier about that whole thing of more is caught than taught, which at the end of the day, that really goes back to who you are. Because there's this old leader I remember from like 15 years ago said this statement. People said similar things, but you teach what you know, but you reproduce who you are. And so in parenting, and again, correct me if I'm wrong as a non-parent, but I feel like there's probably like two things when it goes into parenting. There's number one, there's the practical like parenting techniques of what you teach, but then there's the like essence of who you are in your spirit that you impart. The joy, the attributes of your spirit is going to get in their spirit. And so that kind of goes back to like who I'm becoming matters and how I'm parenting. And I'm just curious, you don't have to peel the hood back too far, more than you want to, but what I'm just curious your journey. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, that's a deep question.
You hate me.
No, I love you. No, I think what you said was so good, because I think sometimes as parents, we get irritated with our kids for replicating an attitude that we have. Like I see it all the time. So like I've spent a lot of time talking with teenagers, and they'll talk to me about, oh, my parent yelled at me about this, or or upset me, whatever. And then it's funny that the parent will do the exact same thing. And it ends up being this vicious circle of the parent trying to correct a behavior that they haven't fixed in themselves yet.
Wow. Yeah.
And we talk about this in leadership. Leadership and parenting are actually not that different. But you can't lead people to places that you're not going.
Yeah, that's good.
So if you as a parent aren't willing to peek behind your own hood and take a look at, what are the skeletons in my closet? What do I need to deal with? Then you're not going to be able to do that with your child. And your child's not going to be able to do that themselves.
That's good.
So again, like, just to be a little bit transparent, like I've had, depression, anxiety stuff going on in my life, 2-3 years ago. And if, let's say I had done nothing about it, just ignore it, whatever, I'm fine. I'm a man,
Yeah. Can you do that again?
No.
Is that manly?
That's one time a year. That's what men sound like.
Oh, okay.
That's what I do in the mirror every morning.
Like, all right, yeah. But like, if I had ignored it, that would affect the way I parent. That would affect my viewpoint.
Yeah.
And as Milo and Cooper became teenagers, they would start to reproduce the attitudes and actions in my.
Yeah. What if you just try to be a good parent without addressing you?
Well, see, here's the problem: is that kids are insanely intuitive. We say this all the time. Like, teenagers have the best BS meter.
Yeah.
Yes.
They can see through your crap.
Kids
Right.
know
Immediately.
who is the weaker parent. Kids know who is the one that they can go to, and either dad will say yes or mom will say yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they automatically know that. Yeah.
They know it so quick. And so if you're saying one thing and doing another, they know.
Yeah.
You're not tricking anybody. And so we as parents have to, really our kids are like a mirror almost. They'll make us see things in ourselves that we don't want to see. And before we ever try to correct it or lead them through it, we have to lead ourselves through it.
That's good.
That's
That
makes
good.
sense.
Truthfully, one of the reasons maybe I I did know it at the time. I don't know why I had the magic number of 5 years. Who knows? Like I said, I was a crazy person, pregnant. But the reason why I wanted more time before I had kids was truthfully to grow up. I didn't know why 5 years was magic, but I knew that I needed work. And just to kind of what I felt like I needed to work on was probably my insecurity. And I knew that if I could grow in spirituality, in just in all areas, truthfully, the better off my child would be.
Yeah.
And so I think that was the fear. That was what that was the waiting. Financially, I wanted to make sure we were set.
Yeah.
And so I knew that if I could raise a child and I was whole and healthy, that was obviously going to be that much easier.
Yeah.
And I just needed more time. I felt like I needed more time.
That's good.
And so I would envision sort of, for example, and both of our kids are in sports, and I know we wanted to get to sports and activities later.
Yes.
But both of our kids are in sports. And when our son started to get in football really early on, he took an interest in it very early on. I can remember just watching him and not saying a word. I didn't want him to think that I cared one way or the other, truthfully. I mean, on the inside, I'm like, that's my son. But I wouldn't say, I would cheer a little bit, but I intentionally, when we got in the car and we were driving home, I just let him talk. And whatever he was saying, if he did bad, good, I acted like I didn't care either way. And I always just say, do you know that mommy just loves to watch you play? That's it. I just love to watch you play.
Yeah.
There are kids who have so much pressure. I can't imagine. Sometimes parents, we put them in activities and we don't, myself included, I put my kids in activities and I don't realize that might be really hard for a 3-year-old to sit and watch this perimeter of parents, just all eyes on them.
Right.
And then we wonder why they're insecure.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
I have a question. This may be related, maybe kind of unrelated, on the sports thing. Like I once heard someone counseling parents, obviously to affirm their kids and everything they do. Man, you're incredible at this. You're great at this. And just speak life, speak life, speak life. But to be careful to speak more to capture them in moments where they're winning, to celebrate it, but to capture them more in character moments than talent moments.
Yes.
I just would love to hear
Yes.
you guys speak to that, because from what I understand, one of the dangers, and it makes sense to me, again, in leadership or whatever else in life, is the resounding, whatever celebrated is repeated, whether it's leadership or parenting. And speaking like I'm a parent, so for all you parents, let me just tell you, no, but I just know human nature, what's celebrated is repeated. And how important is it, the proportions of what you choose to affirm and to celebrate?
Yeah, I think that's huge. I think it was like a blog post like a year ago that was like, there are parents that I don't know if I go all the way to say this, but there are some parents that won't compliment their kids on their physical appearance because they don't want their confidence to be built in their image because they're going to get old someday, or they're going to, they're going to get in an accident and they're going to get a scar, or whatever.
Have ugly birthmarks.
They're going to have ugly birthmarks and be called Birthmark Becca forever.
Hey, that cannot catch on.
That could be the title of this podcast.
Birthmark
there we go.
Becca.
Just, you're welcome, Pastor Kevin.
But no, I think it is much more important
See, I got it
to
covered up.
affirm and celebrate the things they are choosing to do. So like to bring back the sports analogy, I think it'd be much more important to affirm and celebrate and compliment a kid's work ethic in a sport rather than their actual physical talent.
I love that.
Not to say like, don't tell them they're good. Like that'd be ridiculous. But make it a bigger deal that they're diligent. Make it a bigger deal that they work hard.
That's good.
Make it a bigger deal that they're a good sport. All the things that they are choosing.
Celebrate the character.
Right.
I love that.
I one time was watching a basketball game, and one of the players really slammed into another player, which I guess you're not supposed to do, and knocked the other player down. And the player that did that immediately said, "Totally my fault. I'm sorry." That's what he said right away. And that team ended up winning the game. He ended up doing amazing. But I can remember overhearing the coach talking to that player and said nothing about the fact that he made the winning basket. He said, he brought that up. He brought up the fact that immediately he said to the other kid, hey, that was my fault. I
love that.
That's always stuck with me. You know, that was what stood out.
I love that. Speaking of sports, let's go there.
Okay.
It has got to be, fortunately, it's got to be a good thing for any parent listening in that even though we're all in different places in life, if you're a parent listening in, 2020, sports in general, like, I think most parents are hacking through the same jungle of what's balance in life and what's balance for my kids. And so I would just love for you to speak to that. Some of the things you're observing that, this is a safe place to say, here's what concerns me. Here's some things I'm seeing that concern me. And, even from a church or faith community context, what is it? Because it's got to be, I know when I played, because I was kind of always been a sports guy. But, no, my favorite thing in the world is making Jesse laugh. But I think, I did play baseball most of my life through high school. And then I think it had started, culture had started shifting at that point, as long ago as that was, to where if you're going to be in a sport, I feel like now it's not high school, it's all the way from elementary school age, that if you're going to be in a sport, it's going to consume your life. And so what does that look like to cheer your kids on? You want them to be active, you want them to make friends, you want them to find hobbies and passions and interests, but to bring balance, especially if there's priorities of faith and family. What does that look? What concerns you? What does that look like? Any tips? I want to take notes.
I would say something that concerns me right off the bat. You just brought it up, that it is taking over their life. And sometimes I watch families and I think, okay, they've got it. They've got the balance. Everybody's in one sport, but it's not overtaking our life. And then I see the extreme, which sometimes can be more common than I'd like to see, where it is the main. It's the main thing in their life. And every time you talk to that parent, it's like, so how's everything going? And they immediately start in on the sports. And I just think that's a dangerous direction to head. Truthfully, and I can speak because I'm not slamming sports. Both my kids are in sports and activities. So please don't think that I'm saying that. But I think the bigger thing is when it becomes the main goal. What I think in my head is, so do they want them to play in high school and be amazing? And that's great. But do they want them to peak in high school? You don't want your kids to peak in high school and then that's it. That can't be the end goal.
Right.
I see a lot of families that, now if you have any complaints about this, it's russ.moore@thex.church. Y'all are missing church for sports. Okay.
Should we go there for a second for anybody from the church? Here's my non-parent let me just say, here's my human observation, is that whether it's a leader in our lives or a parent in our lives or anybody we look up to, I'm not going to remember what they tell me is important. I'm going to remember what they prioritize is important.
Yes.
And timing and what's chosen over what screams really loud.
Right.
Louder than words. But what does a parent do? I think I was telling you guys, I actually asked Pastor Tim a few weeks ago, because it's one of those things, I try to be really careful when I'm speaking to people in church or a parent in general. I always want to be super delicate. But I asked him, I was like, one day, like, what do you do with sports? And he said something I've heard other leaders I really look up to say. He said, for us, we have just kind of our rule is like each child does one sport a year. And there might be certain moments, if it's a special tournament, where they'll miss whatever's important. Maybe you're not in a faith community. Maybe for you it's school or whatever it is. But in our context, you're dealing with a faith community of what we think the eternal things of the soul are the ultimate priority above everything else. And so I'm just curious, even just practically, Jesse, you're a youth pastor. So
I'm ready to go in.
I'm going to get you fired up. I know, let me speak from my context. I was involved in student ministry for 15 years, vocational student pastor for 5 years. And what I experienced a lot of times is, this is live, so I just want to be so careful. But I experienced parents that would prioritize in home time and on weekends anything but what they would say is the most valuable thing in their life.
Right.
And then they would drop them off with me 45 weeks a year, and I was expected to fix it. Is that okay to say?
I think so.
What? I'm gonna take it off me and put it on you.
Yeah.
What are you observing? What are you experiencing? And is it the youth pastor's job to fix a student?
Oh boy, remind me about that one. No, so like you said, I think sports are great. I played sports from like first grade up until 10th grade. Love sports. They teach you a lot of valuable life lessons. But you know, I've talked with parents about like, oh yeah, they're playing like travel sports seem to be the ones that always take place on the weekends. Like, oh well, they only have this opportunity when they're in high school. Like it's temporary. You know, church will be around forever. And my point is, exactly. Like, church is the bigger rock, as you preached, you know, about a year ago. When they're a kid, like again, more is caught than taught. And as you kind of said, like, time is our most valuable currency as human beings. And so what we spend the most time on indicates what our biggest priority is in reality, no matter what we say it is.
Yeah.
So if as parents, we allow our kid to dictate whether or not the church goes, or the family goes to church, or, you know, if you're not part of a faith community, whatever it is, then they're going to grow up thinking that church is optional. Because, well, I want to do this and I want to go do that, you know. But if we instead say, okay, well, youth group happens on Wednesdays. So before the season starts, we're going to talk to the coach and say, hey, we want to be involved, we want to play, but I have this priority before sports.
Would it be a good exercise for a parent to say, here is what I want my child to become? Not in I'm dictating specifically what they do, but here's their soul, their life, their character, where I want to see them go in life. And based off that, decide what are the non-negotiables and what are the optionals? Yeah.
I mean, I think you maybe alluded to it earlier. Like, by showing them literally, hey, this is priority, this isn't, as they're developing, that's going to be something that naturally carries with them into their adult life. Where if we raise them to say, oh no, church is a non-negotiable, not because it's legalistic and we're shamed or shunned if we miss, but no, this is just a priority, that we want to be invested in the life of this house, this church. Then they're going to grow up with that instilled in them, and not only instilled, but they've literally watched it firsthand play out.
And they'll hopefully, it seems like from that point, as they see mom and dad not just make it a chore or duty, but I once heard this, and again, as a non-parent, you guys can tell me if this is right or wrong. I once heard that the greatest currency of which to pass off values is through joy.
Yes.
And so not only when they see you engaged in what you would deem important, but when they see you active and passionate and joyful about it, they're not going to remember what mom, in my mind, did out of duty. But whatever they see dad excited, when they see dad excited to write, I have a feeling they may or may not be like, oh man, that makes me excited. When they see that, man, dad really loves Jesus and really loves people, I think that's going to rub off, and it's going to, I really love, that makes, I heard, I'm going to quote him again. They asked Judah Smith how he's so humble and so loving, and he said whenever they walked into rooms, his dad, who was a pastor, would look for the lonely. And he would look for whether it was the person that everybody else in the room would seem to overlook. That's who his dad would go to. And so they started this mantra as a Smith clan. Whenever they leave the house, they said, we are the Smiths. We look for the kind. We are kind and encouraging, and we look for the lonely. We're kind and encouraging, we look for the lonely. And I love what you're saying, because I just think in every area of life, it just seems like the actions, we've heard it a million times, speak louder than words. And what you as a parent are the most prioritized, the most passionate about. Not what you say when you sit them down and say, now this is really important. Right. The things that you don't have to say with words because your life screams it. It seems like are going to be the things that deposit and go down. And
if you, as a parent, when they're young, and I'm not saying this is an excuse, but you are prioritizing things over attending church together as a family, why would they not do that also as an adult? They're not going to turn 18 or get out of school and not be in activities any longer, and then all of a sudden say, I'll make church a priority on my own. That doesn't happen. I mean, assuming you're listening to this, you want your child raised in a faith community, the statistics show it's like 87%. If you want your child to continue attending the church, you just have to go with them. You just have to bring them. And I understand there are weeks, we're not saying 52 out of 52. You know, there are weeks that it's going to happen. But I will say, again, because I can speak from experience, it's 2020. Well, okay, when it was normal, when it was 2019, there are activities, a million leagues and a million clubs. They don't have to be on Sunday morning. We have my kids come to church in their uniform. Yes, they have. But by and large, there's tons of activities that should not interfere with Sunday morning.
So before we move on to something else, maybe a little bit more generic, I want to pick on the church again really quick. And it really, this probably applies to everybody, but there's this verse where Paul is writing to Timothy. Paul didn't have any kids, but he had someone that was like a son to him, Timothy. And he kind of raised him up, mentored him up, and he said this. He said, what you've heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, what you've learned, what you've absorbed from me, entrust to other faithful men who will be able to also entrust that to others. And I heard a leader, I heard Erwin McManus say this, and I just thought this was such a beautiful way to say it, if it's true, is that children are an entrustment, not a possession. But it seems so many, and I don't know, maybe more in the church than not in the church. So we'll just pick on the church for a minute in case you're listening to this and you're not from the church and you enjoy picking on the church. But it seems like so many, whether it's vicariously living through the dreams they never experienced, or whether it's through a controlling, I don't know, whatever, it seems to me that is a really powerful and important delineation of seeing children as an entrustment that you get to steward for God or whatever you believe versus a possession to control. And the frustration and exhaustion that's got to come from that latter option. Like what? I don't know. I'm just curious your thoughts. Disagree, agree, expound.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think sometimes, we've seen this maybe more in the generation previous to mine where like the dad would live through the son of like, oh no, you're going to play football. And oh, my son's not getting enough playing time. That probably still exists today, but like.
It does.
Which that's a whole other thing. But I think it's important for us to understand as parents that our kid is not, it's not our job to tell our kid who they are. It's our job to help them become who they are, if that makes sense.
That's good.
Like, it's not, oh, you're going to be this, and I'm going to dictate what your career is going to be, and I'm going to whatever. It's my job to help you figure out where your passions are. It's my job to help you double down on your strengths and reveal your strengths to you. And help you avoid the pitfalls of life that I found and all that. But it's not to say so it's like I am Milo's dad, right? Milo, like, this is going to sound confusing, but hopefully it helps you understand what I'm trying to say. Like, I am not Milo's dad and he needs to listen to me. It's Milo is my son and it's my job to help raise him.
Wow.
And help him become who he is.
That's good.
And there's so much more freedom in that.
Yeah.
I mean, what a horrible pressure that I own my kids. Then it's all on
That's illegal.
me. Yes, that is. But then it's all on me.
And it is.
That's
It
so
is.
much pressure. There's so much more freedom in that I've been entrusted.
That's good.
That's a lot less pressure than I have to make them a certain way. Rather, I just mold and guide.
Yeah.
And there's so much freedom in that.
It's like there's this joyful, I assume, looking at it that way, there's this joyful responsibility that I get to steward and mold and shape, but not control and enforce and own.
No,
and
that's exhausting.
How do you think that factors into even, maybe this is, again, getting more practical, because I really want you guys to I want you to hone in on what you see. Like, we talk about words, but let's talk about tone. How much does frustration and tone, and maybe this, I don't know, I want to learn from you guys on discipline.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the way that you view that stewardship of your children even goes into how you discipline and the tone of which you approach and the techniques of which you approach. What are the things, and I know your guys' hearts, and anybody listening knows your hearts. You are not even beginning to come from a standpoint of, oh, we're experts or whatever.
No.
But you are incredible parents.
Thank you.
And you do this for a career, and you get a front row seat to healthy, unhealthy, and everything in between. And I'm just like, what do you notice when it comes to correcting, disciplining, tone, all that is unhelpful versus helpful?
So I want to say one more thing about the what we were just talking about. I think how we as parents can gauge like which side of that spectrum we're on, whether or not we're the controlling ownership, you're my kid and you're going to do what I say, or I'm helping raise, is like, think about what you think when they have accomplishments. Like, think about what you're going to imagine when they're graduating high school. If you think, oh, I did it.
Yeah.
No, you didn't.
Yeah.
You were there for it.
Yeah.
But that attitude should be, no, they did it.
That's good.
They did it and I helped them.
That's good.
I got to be with them as they were doing it. Not, that's my kid right there. I did that, you know? Anyway, so
that's good.
To the tone thing, I think I want to speak to this from like the teenager perspective, because
Okay.
I've like so many times have I sat down with a teenager that's made a bad decision. And they've even gone as far as to acknowledge they've made a bad decision because they're sitting with me talking about it. Like, hey, I messed up, or I'm in this situation, or I got myself stuck, whatever. And one of the first questions I always ask is, have you talked to your parent about it yet? And 99 times out of 100, the answer is no. Because, oh, I can't tell them that. They'll kill me. They'll blow up. And I think what's really important for us to remember as parents is to parent with emotion, but not parent out of emotion.
That's good.
So like,
yeah.
being a parent, you're going to get mad at your kid. They're going to do things that you have told them a million times not to do. And they're going to do it anyway. Because guess what? You did that when you were a kid too. Every kid ever has done that. So instead of responding out of emotion to, let's say, a teenager that said they did something stupid, fill in the blank, instead of exploding, going, I can't believe, are you an idiot? I've told you 100 times not to do that. Because guess what? That's a surefire way to make sure they never tell you anything ever again. What you're going to do is not create a well-behaved kid. You're going to make a really good liar.
Wow. Yeah.
And then you're going to come ask me, why won't they talk to me? Well, maybe it's because your initial response told them they're not allowed to talk to you. So, and we've talked about this before. It's totally fine as a parent. Again, more is caught than taught. You're going to teach them how to process negative emotion.
Yeah.
If they tell you something that makes you mad, it's perfectly fine to say, we're not going to talk about this right now. Because I want to have a moment to process and think before we talk about this. So, however, you're going to, you need to go hang out in your room for a little bit, or we'll talk about this when we get home, or whatever.
Yeah.
But to explode, it is going to teach them, oh, it's not okay to talk to you about this.
And
So good.
from a kid perspective, so oftentimes when I hear families talk to me about, and first I'm going to preface by saying I absolutely lose my temper and yell. So I'm not even trying to hide like I don't.
Oh, yeah, I totally have two, by the way.
Okay, yeah. A lot.
Maybe good to put out there for every parent, just like it is in every other place in life. It's about progress, not perfection.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Whether it's looking under the hood or whatever it is.
Yeah, well, if I trace back, why did I lose my temper? Why did I yell? I can kind of trace it back to intentional parenting, just like we opened up the podcast with. And so let's take, for example, that mornings. This is where a parent finds themselves just going rogue. Mornings, that getting ready for school, the breakfast, all that. Oh, I just lose my, mornings are horrible. I lose my temper every morning. Well, let's talk about what your household looks like in the morning. Is everybody waking up on time? Are you waking up on time? When you say, is it, we have 1 minute, get your shoes.
I thought you were going to say something else.
Okay,
This is a real podcast. This is authentic.
Where are the shoes? Are the
Right.
shoes in a spot where they can find them? And I'm not saying you as a parent should put the shoes away. Do they have a spot? The night before, were book bags packed, or are we scurrying to do this at the last minute? If they're old enough, can they throw themselves a bowl of cereal? And do they know where this is there order? That's the intention. The intention is the home orderly? Because that will eliminate a lot of your
You are
screaming.
a person of order.
I am a person of order. And if you have order, it will eliminate so much screaming.
You think some order can equate a little bit more peace?
Absolutely. If everything has a place, if everything has a spot, typically mornings are a little faster.
How do you talk to your kids, though, if they're not doing that? I want you to get gritty with this. What are the things?
This sounds like I'm really patting myself on the back, but lately what I've been doing is saying, what role did I play? What role did I play in this chaotic morning? What role did I play? And I'm usually able to see where I played a role.
That's good.
I haven't. Well, I haven't taught them. I haven't given them a space to put their book bag, so that that's the role that I would play.
No, that's great. Okay, but
Yeah.
let's say that's later. but in the moment,
Yes.
what I'm curious about is how do you speak or not speak to your kid when you feel like just losing it? On an ideal moment, what would you? Okay, let's say it this way. What was later on? You're going to have your Gandhi moment where you reflect on what you could have done and meditate for 10 minutes and all that stuff. I'm just kidding. I think it's awesome. But beyond that, like, how do you practically respond in the moment? Do you think it's healthy for conflict de-escalation or whatever?
Engage less. The best advice I could give is stop engaging in the back and forth. Say, okay, let's just take, for example, let's go back to the chaotic morning. I'm not going to say it anymore. And I would even say this. I do say this. I'm not going to say it anymore, and actually mean that. I'm going to lose my temper if you don't get your book bag right now. Not engaging. Not engaging. I will not engage in the back and forth. That would be my best piece of advice. Do not keep the back and forth, because they'll out-talk you. I have a daughter that will... I have a son that's going to be a lawyer, apparently, and a daughter that can out-talk me. I will not engage in the back and forth.
That's good. That's good.
I think one of the things that's important, like, I'm very introverted, very quiet person typically. So that is obviously going to affect the way that I parent. But one thing I actually am very passionate about is not correcting my kid in public in a way that shames them. I think maybe we've all, and maybe you do this as a parent and whatever. I don't know what I'm talking about. This is just what I believe. If you're in the grocery store and you're screaming at them to where half the store can hear, you're not correcting at that point. You're shaming, is my opinion.
Yeah. And they don't hear you.
They're not.
They don't hear you.
They're just embarrassed and feel shameful.
Exactly.
Which is actually defeating the purpose. Your job is to correct, not to destroy, right? So, like what I do, and this works well with Milo. He's my only kid. Maybe it won't work with Cooper. I don't know. I'm going to figure it out. But what I do if we're in public and he's running away or not listening or throwing a fit is I pull him close to me and I whisper in his ear. And I say, hey, we don't do that here.
That's good.
We're out in public, whatever. And 9 times out of 10, he listens. But if I'm correcting in a way, hey, it just doesn't work. You're escalating, not de-escalating.
And again, to take it further, and not to say that what you're doing isn't great, because it is. That's fantastic. To take it a step further, to be more intentional, I would often, because I had the toddler days, I vividly remember, on the way to the store, I'm going to say, do you remember the rules of the store?
Yep.
That's that intentional.
That's good.
Do you remember the rules of the store? What happens when you want to touch something at the store and it's not yours? Just taking 5 minutes as you pull up in the parking lot, that de-escalates a lot. And then
we're coming here to get milk.
Yes.
Not toys. We're coming here to get milk.
Yes. Nope, it's not a toy day. And then stop engaging.
So this shows that both of your kids, all 3 of the kids, have messed up at some point.
Yeah.
Not to spend a lot of time here, but is there a moment, because both of you in different ways are teachers, which means you also get to engage with parents. Is there a devastating moment where parents have the discovery that their kid's not perfect?
All the time.
And is it important to be able to acknowledge that your kid is a human? And how does that play out in just things you observe? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, admitting to yourself that your child isn't perfect, and then also saying to your child, I know you're not perfect. I don't expect perfection. What that does is get them into a habit early on of dependency on the Lord. At a young age, especially when I can bring it up about myself, I bring up to my kids what my weaknesses are. And I just say, and that's where
that's awesome.
There's so many.
That's something I've also heard people talk about, the importance of like when parents, in a healthy way, not saying, hey, I did something crazy last night, whatever, but for parents to be able to process their imperfections with their kids, to be able to tell them, to be able to have the ability to say, I'm sorry, I messed up, I apologize. Like, how important is that even for the emotional processing of a kid?
It's so bonding to have a moment to apologize to your child, especially when they're owed an apology.
Yeah.
For one thing, kids are so forgiving. I mean, they're just so forgiving. The bond that is automatically created, it's such a bonding moment when they get to see you be vulnerable and apologize for your actions. I have gone back and apologized. I lost my temper and I'm sorry. It's okay, Mommy. I mean, they're just right away, but it's also teaching them to apologize when they're wrong.
I'm going to get really emotional, spiritual really quick. What has being a father, how is that in your relationship with God? Like, how has that impacted and shaped your view and the way you view God? For anybody out here that...
really, I think in more ways than I can probably put accurately into words. You know, you hear this before you're a parent, and before I was a parent, I was like, oh yeah, I can kind of get what it feels like to be a parent and have a child that's yours. The reality is you just can't. It is the love and the connection and you can't put it into words. It's different than any other relationship ever. And to hear all the different ways of the way Scripture talks about God being our Father and we are His children, and to think about the way that I view my kid is the same way God views me, and that's incredible.
Yeah.
And I think as parents we can learn a lot from the way God parents us, if you know what I mean. Like, I think there's something about being a parent, like when they're really young, I think we actually get parenting better than when they're older, in a way. So like when your kid is learning how to walk and they fall down, you don't get mad. Like, they're learning.
Yeah.
They're getting there. You always get excited. Oh, they took a couple steps and then they fell.
Yeah.
Okay. That's how God treats us too.
Right.
Like,
Then why do we always feel like God is so frustrated with me? And if I mess up, He's just...
well, I think there's
It's probably
maybe,
how we were parented.
Exactly. There's maybe an ounce where we put our earthly parents and the way they responded to when we messed up onto God.
Yeah.
And then maybe we're putting our own,
Insecurities.
insecurity and the way we process failure onto God as well.
Yeah.
But like, we've got to remember that as parents, as humans, that the way we treated our kids when they were learning to walk, they took a couple steps and I fell down. Oh, we're never mad. Oh, you fell down. Are you kidding me? Are you stupid? Like, why don't you know how to do this? Every human ever can do this. What are you talking about? Nobody talks like that. Instead, we're like, oh, we celebrate the steps and pick them up when they fall. Like, but I think maybe in parenting, we lose that somewhere. Somewhere along the line, we forget to celebrate the baby steps.
Yeah.
You know? And the fall becomes the bigger deal. When our job as parents is to guide the baby steps through every phase of their life and pick them up when they fall. And
That's good.
understanding that our relationship with God is the same. He's not mad when we fall. Instead, He's more excited about the steps and wants to help pick us back up so we can take a couple more steps.
That's so good.
And I would say that, so I struggle a little bit with vulnerability, and definitely having kids has softened me. When I realized, 2 minutes into meeting my son, that, I would run through a burning building for a baby that I just met.
Wow. Yeah.
That's how God feels about me. He sent His son Jesus to die for me, and that doesn't even scratch the surface. I mean, it doesn't even begin to scratch the surface. If I'm feeling I would run through a burning building for this baby, take that and just amp it up, and that is how God feels about you.
Man. We have so many more topics, but I just think this is a good place to begin to land.
Yeah.
As a non-parent at times, when I've tried to imagine God's love for me, it's really easy for me to believe God loves other people. I really struggle at times. Like, I believe it, like, theologically in my mind, but I really, because I'm like, I know me, and so it can be really hard for me to believe God loves me. But like, when I think about my parents, and I am fortunate the kind of parents I have, and And my mom, if you've met Sweet Mary Jane,
Oh,
I mean, I could burn up 9 villages, and this isn't part of this isn't great.
See,
She'd be
that's
like,
those moms from the South.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And then I'm like, but when I think about, but wait, that is not even a fraction.
Yes.
That's not even like there's verses that literally talk about. I was last night thinking about this verse because I needed it, of how as a father has compassion on his children, so God has pity on those who love him. And even if mother and father forsake, I love just that thought of the exponential. If you are a parent and you're struggling emotionally right now, to remember, because I also wonder if there's this dichotomy that could be helpful. They say in leadership that you can't be a good leader unless you're first a good follower. Mm-hmm. I wonder if maybe some healing medicine for a parent listening today is you can't stay sane as a parent and your calling as a parent unless you also remember your calling as a child. Mm-hmm. Not to be childish, but childlike, that before you're even a parent, we believe if you know Jesus, you're a son and you're a daughter. Mm-hmm. And maybe you need to receive from your parent and get filled up so that you can feel full to, I don't know. I just feel so encouraged by what you've shared. Couple wrap-up questions.
Okay.
And we could go all day long. Put in the chat if you want parenting part 2. We didn't even get to parenting and technology. There's so many things.
Yeah, we didn't get to like 3/4 of what we planned to talk about.
But this has been so helpful for me, and I've just learned so much from you guys. And a couple wrap-up. Number 1, for anyone that's has any interest in your role specifically and accessing your ministry and what it looks like, I'd love for you to just give a sneak peek of your ministry, what your role is here at the church, and why it's so valuable and what you do.
So there's another great staff person here, and that's Morgan. And Morgan and I
shout out to Morgan.
Yeah, shout out to Morgan Clapprood. She's amazing. And she's, if you come to church, our church, and you want to check your kids in as an infant or as an early toddler, Morgan is going to oversee that and take care of you. If you have a preschooler through 5th grade, we have an amazing ministry where we cater to every mode of learning. Mm-hmm. So if you say, I can't take my kid to church because they're just so bouncy off the wall, they won't listen, we've got a spot for that. Mm-hmm. We obviously know that we want to reach all types of learners. So we have everything from physical activities to stories to whatever appeals to your kid, we've got it covered.
And you guys, I mean, let's just shout out for kids ministry, and especially in 2020, because you guys have made a way. We haven't even talked about COVID and the steps you've taken to keep everyone safe and keep volunteers safe and all of that. But I love, correct me if I'm getting the phrase wrong, but in kids, one of the things that you guys say all the time is we're not babysitting kids, we're raising world changers. Absolutely. And that you really don't just look at them as this is our time to make sure they're okay, while I think it is powerful for parents to have some time undistracted to be poured into each week. But you guys actually look at this as an investment, that this is not just the future generation, this is this generation.
Oh, absolutely. And the best example, we just did a project, Operation Christmas Child. That was for the kids.
Talk about that. That was so cool.
So we packed 175 boxes for children in need overseas. That was an outreach project for kids. We didn't even care what the adults were doing over there. And that was, I think I told you this, I shared with you, every time I do this project with kids, I always see that kid who comes up to me after class or in the middle of class and says, so where are we sending these? And just wants
because they're writing it, right?
Yes, they're taking care of everything. They want to know.
These kids are taking care of it for other kids.
Absolutely. And they know that their little shoebox of love is being sent overseas to another child. And there's always going to be 1 or 2 kids that just ask me more. And I just look and say, that's a future missionary. I know that. And we take that very seriously. We couldn't care, we're not worried. We are worried that we're obviously keeping kids safe and that we are not looking at it as childcare. We are looking at so intentionally beginning support for your kids, beginning love for your kids. They love to go to church, and we want that to start at the youngest of ages.
And it's so cool because, just to brag on you a little bit more, but I hear staff members and just people in the community all the time. They're like, I went in my child's room last night and heard them repeating back this verse, this life lesson, and you know, they're always emotional, and so I just thank you for what you and Morgan and just that whole team are doing. It's unreal. It's unreal.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so youth, kind of our catchphrase is we influence youth to invade culture. Just because I think now more than ever, there are more things fighting for the attention of our teenagers in culture. And at least if you are a Christian parent, you worry that a lot of those influences are negative. And so what we want to do is influence them in a way that's positive and teaches them not only do they have to just not be a victim to culture and go the way that the rest of the world's going, but they can actually take a message of hope and invade the culture that they're a part of.
So good.
And so whether in middle school or high school, like our important things are, we want to make it fun, engaging for them. We want them to make friends in their grade. We want them to hear a relevant message that applies to their life and then get to further discuss how that applies to their life within the context of community.
I love it. Yeah, because that's one of the things you say. I mean, you and all your leaders are so cool. So they all think you're the coolest, you know, leaders in the world. But then also, you know, one of the things I've heard you say is they'll come for the cool, but they'll stay for relationship.
Absolutely.
It's all about relationship. And then once a month, I know one of the things you're doing is bringing all middle school and high school together for just high charging experience on their level. And it's amazing. You're an incredible leader. You are a ridiculous communicator, unreal communicator. But one of the things I love is that one of the things you talked about earlier, you model vulnerability and transparency. And your story, let's be honest, this is probably the most anxious generation. I always, isn't it funny how you talk like a historian in all of humanity? I don't know. I've not been around for all of humanity. But I would venture to say that this is the most anxious generation of humanity.
Sure.
And you, in a very appropriate way, in a responsible way, you peel back the curtain and you don't try to act perfect, but you bring them into your story to show them, hey, I'm human, and you relate to them. But then you talk about how Jesus is taken the shrapnel of what you've gone through in your soul and just made something amazing out of it. And you talk about some of the steps you've taken and how you had to take courageous steps to get honest. And I just love that.
Thanks.
I appreciate you both. I've had a lot of people write in asking for resources, recommendations, any books you recommend, parenting podcasts, books to help parent, books for devotionals for kids. So quick.
Pastor Jess and I both love Levi Lusko.
Okay.
And we were just talking earlier before this started that it's often difficult to find male authors that are gearing their resources toward kids. And so that's why we love Levi Lusko. I love a podcast. I talk about this often called Pardon the Mess. And it's been around for several years now. If you can think of a topic, she has covered it. She has Dr. Tony Evans on. She has Levi Lusko on. Priscilla Schurler is on. Sheila White is on. Sheila White is another person, another author, mostly geared toward young girls. She has journals that are out for young girls. Sheila White has an amazing journal out. Max Lucado is probably the first devotional I did with my kids. It's called Growing in Grace. Very simple, something to do at dinner time.
He's got a lot of stuff, right?
He does have a lot of stuff.
With Proverbs 31, we were talking about a few
Lisa
of the ones.
Turker's has a lot.
Lisa Turker's
yeah.
Proverbs 31, because she's Proverbs 31.
Yes.
And then, what were some of the other ones you were mentioning?
This is old school.
Okay.
I told you I was going to bring up my old school resource. And his name's Dr. James Dobson. He's kind of in charge of that. I mean, back in the day, if you grew up in a Christian home, focus on the family was the way to go. He's amazing. It's timeless. It's old school. Some of it's hard to hear, but it's fantastic.
Yeah, I've just got a couple. I think one that I love a lot is actually done by a company called Orange, which is actually the company we buy our curriculum from that all of our kids do. They have books for every phase and every age of parenting. It's called The Phases. So it's like literally how to parent a 1-year-old, how to parent a 2-year-old. And they have all the way 0 to 18.
What are the phases? And they're like parent, like coach, leader, friend, whatever.
So this is...
I think friends last.
Friends last. Yeah, that probably needs to be last.
Friend is last. Yeah, I think this one is just, it goes by ages. So it's like, this one is broken down by their development. So it's like elementary, middle school, high school.
Okay.
Or infancy, elementary, whatever.
Yeah.
That's a great one. One great resource, which my son is 2.5 and the other one's not born yet. And I'm already starting to think about having the talk with them. Levi Lusko.
What kind of dog?
Sorry, that one. Okay. And especially with today's culture and all that.
Yeah.
So I'm terrified of it a little bit, just to be honest. But Levi Lusko and his wife have a free resource on his website, levilusko.com, and it's completely free, and it's incredible of how to have that talk with your kids this is from a faith-based perspective, is incredible. One other one I like for kids is it's called Indescribable by Louis Giglio.
Yeah.
It's 100 devotionals about science and faith.
Yeah.
Because, especially if your kid goes to, a public school and you're a little bit worried about, well, at church they hear about this way and they hear about this, and it can feel like they, contradict. So this is 100 devos about science and faith. And
Which, by the way, shout out to that. Oh, also, Louis Giglio's book that you loved, Giant Goliath Must Fall, they apparently now have for kids.
Oh.
So, but Indescribable, so a little shout out. I am, not to brag, a godparent to, I think, 8 or 9. They get mad at me because I can't remember. By the way, can you guys clear this up for me? Because some of my God family, I think, is listening right now.
Is this Amanda?
This is Amanda.
Shout out to Amanda.
This is a funny story. We're going to wrap up. She asked me when, Joshua, Johnny, Annie, I know them, Abby, and they're all out there. They know their names. But when, shut up. They asked me, I think when Johnny was born, to be the godparent. I was like, oh my, I would be honored. I was like, okay. So like I would send Indescribable and all these books, and they loved them. And I would post, on their birthdays. And then one day I was talking with Amanda and Jose, and she's like, hey, I'm not that's a big deal, but just notice, like, have you ever sent gifts to any of the other kids? I was like, well, I'm just Johnny's, right? And the fury that came from her, she goes, are you kidding me? She goes, is this why you only post about Johnny? And I said, she goes, no, that means you're godparent to all of them. I said, I did not know this was a thing. Is this a thing?
Is a godparent a thing?
No. Is it a thing that if you're a godparent to one, you're a godparent to all?
I think godparenting is a Southern thing. I don't know.
I think that's the thing.
Oh, that's a Southern thing. Okay.
Godparenting definitely exists here. I don't know if we talk about it as much.
Okay, I thought it was an
that would've
honorary
taken me
thing.
by
Also,
surprise,
by the
too.
way, I said if anything happens, God forbid.
Is that what it is? Wait, you're the godparent? You thought you're only going to take over Johnny?
Yes, and this will spur on conversation for later on. Just so you know, I look at it as an honorary thing, so I get to have gifts and pray. And I do get to call and, speak at their lives, and I enjoy
Amanda,
all that.
call me.
But if anything happens, I love you guys. We'll help them find a home. Sorry. we need to wrap up.
Amanda,
but
I can be the godparent to the other 7.
Can I just say this as a non-parent? If you're a parent listening, you're doing better than you think you are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I can imagine that parents in this day and age would be just so overwhelmed. And I know mom guilt's a thing and dad guilt's a thing. And I did hear one other thing so it's so funny. You're talking about 5-year vision. I've spent some time over the weekend. This is the Enneagram 3 in me, writing out 10-year, 5-year, 1-year vision. And one of the things I wrote, if it does happen to be in the cards that I'll be a biological parent one day. One of the things I wrote, I heard both Chris Hodges and Craig Rochelle say, is a win, what they consider a win in parenting, is if they parent and discipline and do all those things that a responsible parent should do, but if they do it in such a healthy relational context that when their kids are older and don't have to come back around, they want to.
Mm-hmm.
And so that made it onto my vision list. Is I would love, and this is why I think this conversation is so good, even for me, just because I want to take notes from you guys. I want to be the kind of parent one day that parents responsibly raises up world changers, but the relationship's so healthy and full of joy and love that when they grow up and get older, they want to come back. Mm-hmm. And I just thank you guys for the wisdom that you've shared. And I would just love maybe for you to finish off by any parent listening, especially in the nightmare of 2020 that you guys still make look effortless, even in the pandemic and quarantine. And that was a whole nother fun conversation we were having yesterday about watching you in quarantine. You introvert, you loved it. Not the pandemic, but you loved getting to
staying home all the time. It was incredible.
Your bigger adjustment was
Coming
when
back
quarantine happened. Yeah, when coming back, not to. But wherever anybody is, like, just how could you encourage just the discouraged mom, maybe the single mom, maybe the single dad, maybe just the everyday parent that's trying to make ends meet, and it's like, I'm not a good teacher, and I don't know where all the money's going to come from, and I don't feel like I'm good enough, and I hear you guys say all these things, and they sound amazing, but I feel like if that's the end zone, I am still on yard 10. Like, what just...
I'm going to speak to moms. How about that? You speak to dads. Okay. I want to say, especially here in this community, the overwhelming amount of amazing moms. It's just so inspiring to me to watch the love and the intentionality that goes on into the parenting of moms around here. And if you are feeling discouraged, you are in good company. I'm absolutely discouraged with you. I'm frustrated. But I just want to say, let's just take the pandemic, for example. Slow down. Show yourself grace. Get some rest. Just take it. Honestly, if you had to take it minute by minute, take it minute by minute, the days that you have to take it minute by minute, and everything is going to work itself out. Instead of saying during this pandemic, just for example, 5 minutes before I got here, I was helping my son with the 7 parts of cell plasm. I don't know. Don't correct me on that. I still don't know. Clearly, I didn't do the assignment well. But the bigger picture is, rather than frustrated about that, I drove here and thought, I just got to share that with my 11-year-old. And we laughed about how mom doesn't know how to pronounce stuff. Would I have ever gotten that if he was in school 5 days a week? I wouldn't have gotten that moment.
Yeah.
And so if you just change your perspective, that there is so many positives to pull out of this, instead of, it is demoralizing to know that you don't know how to do 6th grade algebra. It's I just walk away defeated. But
I for sure don't.
Oh, things have changed a lot since I was in 6th grade. And so the bigger picture is, I got this moment with my son that cannot be replaced. It can never be taken away.
Yeah.
And that is the bigger picture. And we will, in 2030, 2020 is going to seem this big. This has been a microcosm of the impact that you're making on your kids. This is not it. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine.
It's good.
That's great. I think my 2 cents would be confident. Be confident in yourself as a parent. If you're not a faith person, then you can eat the fish and spit out the bones of what I'm about to say. But when God was knitting your child together, he had you in mind as their parent. You're not their parent on accident. It's not just a lottery that, I got this kid. God chose that kid for you. Chose you to be their parent. Yeah. Whether your child was an accident or intentional, you're their parent on purpose and for a purpose. And so live in the confidence of that.
Here's what I'm hearing. You are a parent on purpose for a purpose. So let's take all of Becca and Jesse's advice and let's pastor on purpose. Let's pastor parent. I'm just Freudian. Let's parent intentionally. And know that as your parent intentionally, you will not be perfect. But fortunate thing, if you're a parent in 2020, is you're all hacking through the same jungle together, and we're going to get past it together and find a community. Find people like this that you can surround yourself with and learn and bear each other's burdens, and don't do it alone. Don't try to parent alone. But man, what a day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I know this is going to be so helpful to so many people listening in, and so thank you to everyone who has been listening in to the X podcast. As always, we would love your feedback. So rate, review, subscribe, and send us an email. We want to know any other questions, follow-up questions you have that this spurred on, or about any other topic, life, culture, spirituality, politics. We may get controversial again soon. Who knows? But send us an email at podcast@thex.church. That's podcast@thex.church. Jesse, Becca, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was fun.
It was a lot of fun.
Learned a lot. Let's do it again.
Part 2.
Part 2.